Umoja. So hopefully you are doing well. God bless you. Hope that all is well with you and your family. Let's go live here and let's have some fun. Let's talk about unity and what does it mean to be unified and what is unity? What is the energy of unity and how can we move forward with that a little bit? So first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for those who've been joining me and commenting down below. I love your comments. I try to read as many of them as I can. I very much appreciate it. It adds so much to the conversation. I'd like to talk today about unity. I want to hear your thoughts down below. What do you think about unity in the African American community, unity just in general, and how do we cultivate that as we think about that within the context of Kwanzaa and various things like that? And I do want to say, first of all, thank you just so much to those who have been supporting my books and just looking at memberships online. I very much appreciate that here on YouTube. I want to mention the stories about Black History. We have, Black History Month coming up and a lot of people reading a lot of good things about just our history, African American history in general, and just history in general. So I want you actually to check out Stories About Black History. It's available on Amazon and Kindle as well as in hardback. So get a chance to take a look at that. I very much appreciate that. And I thank you for those who've been supporting me in looking at. So let's talk a little bit about unity and the whole concept of unity and what is meant by unity and how do we look at it? Because I think it's such an interesting thing, because if we think about unity, a lot of times we're thinking about, we think about it within the context. As I read a lot of the Nguzo Saba and the 7 Principles of Kwanzaa, and I read a lot just in general and hear people talking over the years, people will say things like, we need to be unified, or we need to read, or we need to make sure we come together. We need to make sure that we're working together as brothers and sisters. And when you think about it, and when I think about it, the whole concept of unity is bigger than just, us saying it. It's bigger than just saying, you need to do this. It's almost like, telling a child that you need to manifest some type of characteristic, some type of very important ideal and characteristic, but not really give them the ability to develop it, right? So when we think about unity, we have to think about it within the context of really an energy and what does it mean and how do we cultivate that? And it's more than just saying that we have it. What can we do to do that? And that's what Umoja means. So as we think about that, I think about a lot of things we've been talking about, a lot of the Kemetic deities, Kemetic and Kushite deities that deal with some of the more famous deities that we have in Kemetic theology. As we think about that, I think about Asar. And Asar to me represents unity. When you think about Asar, and if you've read various things in Mentuhotep or various things like that, volume 1, you will see the whole idea of being able to take all of God's purpose for you, your divinity, and living that out, being able to live out your divinity as God intended to you, or be a divine person on earth as God intended you to be. One of the things that comes along with that is understanding that we come from one source. One of the things that comes along with that is understanding that we're all connected, that we're all in the same boat, so to speak, that we're all in this together. And you can see God in yourself, which is very important, because you really can't be an Asar. You can't be a divine being if you don't see God in yourself. And you really can't be a divine being as holy as you should be if you don't see God in somebody else, right? And recognize that person there, no matter where they're from, India, England, wherever they're from, being able to see that person has God in them as well, and the ability to manifest it, right? Just like I can manifest it, just like you can manifest it, somebody else can manifest it. And when you realize whether they're manifesting it now or not, but when you realize that, you start to see the unity, right? You also start to see there's not very much pushing against you, because you are God and you're divine, and you can start to see your way pushing through things where other people think that is impossible to go, right? So that whole idea of seeing a connection with people is part of the foundation, part of a fundamental basis of unity. When I can see God in you and God in myself, then I'm starting to understand that we have a connection. We have a divine connection. You have the ability to be good. I have the ability to be good. And that's something that we can talk about. And, it's kind of funny because I always feel like when I get people give comments and say things, people say comments and they'll say, why talk about this type of history, or why talk about Black history, as if talking about a particular type of history makes you not like other people. And to me, one of the biggest tests of love, one of the biggest tests of not being, a racist or a biased person, is being able to love yourself and others. right? Because loving myself or loving and appreciating someone else shouldn't mean that I have to shrink. I don't need to be a shrieking violet, so to speak. I don't need to stand in the shade and not celebrate my heritage, celebrate who I am. I should be able to be in my fullness, right in the sun, as God made me, celebrating my heritage and being able to recognize the beauty in other people's heritage too. Because to me, that's real non-racism. That's really accepting people, not telling everybody to act one way, everybody to think one way, everybody to look one way. There's one standard standard of beauty. There's one thing you need to do. I don't think that's really the fundamental basis for not being racist and the fundamental basis for unity. I think about a beautiful garden. You can have a garden that exists with all different types of flowers and shrubbery and all kinds of things and they can all have their place in the sun and get their water and shine and live to their fullest without competing, without hating one another. And I think that that's part of the challenge. A lot of people will put forth this kind of straw man argument, or just kind of an argument in general, say, don't teach Black history, don't talk about it because somehow that's dividing us. That's absolutely not true. I ought to be able to look at Scottish history. I ought to be able to look at African American history. I ought to be able to look at English history. I ought to be able to look at Indian history, Chinese history from all over the world, and to be able to see, what resonates, the lessons, because, all of our research, as Malcolm said, history is best qualified to reward of all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. So the idea of not seeing it in yourself, and that allows you to respect other people, it doesn't work like that. You really, truly have to love yourself in order to be able to love someone else. And that concept of unity, in my opinion, comes in with that. Unity equals love, right? When I think about it, I think about Hathor as being that representation of unity and that representation of divinity wrapped up in one. And I see people like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman as being Hathor-like, as literally being able to live out their divinity and their purpose on earth and not let other people stop them. And when you think about it, they had to go through some stuff. They had to go through some things in order to be able to manifest the things that they did in their life. God bless you. Thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Thank you. They had to go through some stuff. When you're talking about manifesting a divine principle, is not, you don't just do it from the standpoint of, you just wake up one day and you do it. There's a lot of times trials. There are a lot of times rituals or experiences that you go through that allow you to cultivate that energy, that allow you to cultivate that characteristic. It's like telling a 2-year-old child to read without working with them. But once you work with that child, you see that child begin to recognize words. And before you know it, 5 or 6 years old, they're reading, out the wazoo, because you cultivate it and you work with it. When I think about unity and I think about the concept of Hathor, it's the same way. I think about the people, when you see the people such as Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, when you see the people who manifest great things in life, a lot of times there were experiences that they went through. There were things that they went through to help that energy, that characteristic come out of them. And then they let that thing lead them. They let that thing push them forward. And I think about May 25th when George Floyd died and when he was killed, and that whole thing that happened with that, and how people responded, which I kind of look at it as our Independence Day, really, and how people responded, how we responded to that. And that experience, that unfortunate, horrible experience, was something that galvanized people, was something that touched people on the inside that nobody else could deal with. It's not something you could take away. You couldn't put it in a bottle. You couldn't sweep it away. This was something that people were feeling in our souls, right? That had to come out and had to be expressed. And a lot of things were in the way. A lot of things had to move out of the way of that energy. A lot of things that were never going to change. A lot of people that were never going to change. A lot of businesses that were never going to change ended up changing in the wake of that energy, in the wake of that spirit that came forth. And it is obviously an unfortunate, horrible thing that happened. But what I'm saying, a lot of times when we think about the concept of unity, because that was an experience where people were, in many cases, unified in their disgust, unified in their fight against it, unified in their ways to push against things that were taking place. People were unified in that. As you think about the whole concept of unity, you're really talking about a force. You're really talking about an energy. And I think about Kemetic people. I think about people in West Africa. I think about various people around the world, in particular African people, and rituals and ceremonies that were done literally to nurture and to drum up energy, literally to manifest energy in yourself. Kemetic, you read a lot of Kemetic literature, you find that they obviously had dancers, they had singers, they had long ceremonies, lots of ceremonies, and a lot of these things are designed, and even from a West African perspective, a lot of these things are designed to be able to bring about in you a manifestation of a certain energy, a manifestation of a certain characteristic, a manifestation of a certain ideal. And some people will call them, spirits, they'll call them various things, but we're literally talking about energy, and we're talking about an aspect of you that's inside you that's powerful. I mean, when you think about, an atom bomb, whether you're talking about fusion versus fission, being able to bring things together has so much power in it. Being able to have unity and love has so much power in it. And when we think about it from a Kwanzaa standpoint, and thinking about Umoja and thinking about unity, that is one of the most powerful forces. Love is one of the most powerful forces you can have. You know, a mother will move things that you move a car to save her child. People will go out of their way to do things with people they love that they wouldn't do for people they like, right? And so you begin to have an immovable and unstoppable, amazing force when we talk about unity. And I think about when we talk about these things from a community standpoint, it's easy to say, you know, have unity, right? But we don't really get into the discussion of how to develop that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, because maybe some people have, you know, they are dealing with, you know, rites of passage programs that help you develop certain characteristics that will move you forward. Maybe people are dealing with that. If you have rites of passage programs, if you have things to help you do it, but the idea is that a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, a lot of actually focusing on that ideal and understanding from a spiritual standpoint that there are aspects of your spirit, they're characteristics. I mean, literally you have character. Your character might be honesty. Your character might be courage, you know, and in my opinion, Haru represents courage. Your character might be being able to be unified. Your character might be being able to be disciplined and have that being serving a divine purpose. Your character might be wisdom, right? Being able to think through things or using your imagination. You may have these characteristic traits that are powerful traits that if you put them in service of God, if you put them in service of divinity, they begin to have a powerful impact. And when I think about that, when you think about that, it behooves us, I believe, when we think about Kwanzaa and we think about things in general, a lot of times we'll have, you know, liberation discussions and we leave the spirituality out. We leave the aspect, the most powerful aspect of our being, the things that make us move, we kind of leave out. And we leave it out for various reasons. And I'll touch on that in various ways. In some ways, I think we feel like maybe we've kind of grown out of that, or it's hard to deal with religion and we get mad at certain things and we don't understand or don't really take into account in some instances how our ancestors use these various powers and energies to make themselves have long-lasting societies, to make themselves have unity, right? When you think about it, how were they able to manifest a society that lasted for thousands of years in ancient Kush and Kemet? We're talking about two lands, two different lands, two separate lands that were obviously connected, that had thousands of years of societies that worked together. Of course, there were problems there and out, but they managed able to keep it together for thousands. How did they do that? And you have to look at their spiritual system, their religious cultivation system, how they looked at the world and how they interacted with God. So to me, I don't think that you can separate your spiritual development from the characteristics that we think we need in order to be successful, and unity is one of them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Please put your comments. What do you think about unity? How do you cultivate it? What are your thoughts about rites of passage programs? How can we make sure we move forward and do more with the concept of unity when it comes to just Kwanzaa, just in general in our community? So I thank you so much for joining me. God bless you, and I'll talk to you real soon.